Powers That Be, sponsored by Alex R. White, personal injury lawyers you can trust.
Here on the Powers That Be, a brand new health update from Senator Mitch McConnell from Washington, D.C. The second photo from he and his staff since his June hospitalization. Welcome to the Powers That Be. I'm Isaiah Kim Martinez.
And I'm Doug Proffitt. Isaiah, the new photo came out Sunday, July 26th. Shows McConnell sort of in a different light there with Elaine Chao.
And I believe we have the photo. There it is.
Next to him, but
yeah.
No surprise. The internet is already picking it apart, saying he looks 20 years younger. They're trying to really call into question on whether it's real. But I think what we learned in his new statement here, some interesting information that I thought actually came from his attending physician, and that his rehab is specific to preventing him from falling again, specific to physical therapy and rehab. The doctor didn't mention anything about helping him verbally to speak, so we don't know how violent the fall was or whether he had a concussion, but it's so that he can prevent himself from falling again.
Yeah, and Doug, this was from the Office of the Attending Physician, right, which we've noticed in both statements has sort of been a part of it, saying from the doctor's perspective, here's what we're looking at. We know he's going through intense physical therapy. That's the word that his staff uses, intense therapy multiple times a day.
That he's doing it several times a day.
That he is.
I thought it was encouraging. A lot of people don't like to do this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if he is trying to get back, Susan Collins, the Republican from Maine, just came out this week and said she expects him back in September. That would seem to be more of a timeline that would be more realistic than trying to. I mean, he put this out a week before
Senator Rand Paul had said it wouldn't surprise him in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, the way Mitch McConnell is saying in his statement is that he intends to return. So there isn't any conversation about resigning, which we know that word has come up a lot with Governor Andy Beshear, who continues, the Democrat here in Kentucky, to push for more transparency, video, talking to Kentuckians is what he put in his recent letter, his second letter.
Well, I sort of see it now as Mitch versus Andy, but let's go back to the statement that the McConnell team just put out. Puts it out the week of Fancy Farm. That's an important event for Senator McConnell. Sure. He went down there 42 years ago, like he likes to say that there were no Republicans around him. It was a Democratic stronghold, and I don't really believe that there was going to be a lot of talk on whether he would come this year. Like last year when you were there covering it, that was the big thing. Is he going to show up? But he puts it out saying, I won't be there this year.
I mean, it was honestly, to some, a surprise that he was even there last year, given his sort of a history with some health struggles over the years. And then this year, it was almost like a foregone conclusion he wasn't going to be. And then we got the confirmation. Another man who's not going to be there as well gave his notice. He'll not be attending Fancy Farm is Governor Andy Beshear, again, the Democratic governor here in Kentucky. Here is what he said when I asked him several questions about this repeated urge for transparency in this sort of McConnell saga that we've been seeing.
We have seen rampant speculation across social media and elsewhere. It could all be fully avoided, and it's all within Senator McConnell's power. But because he won't do that, the fact is that we don't know. And that means that the Senate, if he won't provide more evidence, needs to step in and demand it. And I'm not trying to pile on with all this stuff that's out there. All I'm trying to do is ask the bare minimum. And it raises the concern that he might not be able to meet the bare minimum. And if that's true, then yes, Kentucky would need a resignation and would ultimately need a replacement.
You hear the two R's there, resignation, replacement. I mean, this is what some of the folks online have been saying. I mean, he's very
But not trying to pile on. His second letter was very interesting, and we should talk about that.
We actually
First
have
of all, as a Kentucky governor, he's got every right to demand an answer for this.
It is there.
He is the leader of the state. And this was interesting because he mentioned the internet. Well, in this letter that he released, he's picking up a lot of the themes that people have been using on the internet to question whether Mitch McConnell can even come back.
Well, the wording here, he says, I am addressing this letter, this is the first line, to Senator Mitch McConnell under the assumption that he is cognitively, I'm paraphrasing here, but cognitively able to read. He even brought up the ability to read and to communicate and to talk to Kentuckians. The only place we really heard that in depth has been online. Folks with all sorts of conspiracy theories about what condition the senator is in, even pointing out that the photo was taken sort of at the same angle both times. There have been some questions of why doesn't his staff post a picture from him doing physical therapy, even just one photo. But then we know the senator has been admittedly very private about this stuff and has not wanted to essentially show too much.
Well, it's a legitimate request to ask him to let's hear him speak. If he can, again, we don't know how violent the fall was, but this has become Mitch versus Andy. Mitch McConnell, as we know, and he has said from his first statement, comes from a generation where he doesn't want to bother a lot of people with his personal information. He doesn't want you to know a lot about it. He's just going to put his head down and get through it. He has always been that way. There's not a lot of love for the Beshear administration or the Beshear family. He is not going to do anything to help this governor out as far as addressing or reacting to this. He's going to do his own thing. We've seen that. And Beshear is turning up the heat. Every time the governor does this, it makes national headlines.
And I think it's fair to say, Doug, I feel like you would agree with this, that the senator is not going to do something based on what Governor Andy Beshear is telling.
Not a bit.
Like, I'm speculating here a little bit, but I bet you Mitch McConnell probably knows exactly why Andy's doing what he's doing and doesn't necessarily even take any personal hit to it. You know, Senator McConnell knows how politics works as well as anybody in this country. He knows that the governor continues to see more national attention, and that hasn't stopped with this second letter now.
It does go both ways because people know Mitch McConnell so well. I had a viewer of WHS 11 write me simply, and she said, Mitch McConnell would have replaced Mitch McConnell by now. There is a lot of truth in that statement. He probably would have pulled the plug on somebody else had it been at that position.
And, the governor will tell you, from his perspective, that he is essentially saying the same thing that folks at home, his argument that some folks at home are arguing, and that essentially, he is one of 2 U.S. senators, represent Kentucky. Every day he's not there to cast votes. Their voice is not being heard, at least in some capacity. So that's kind of the back and forth.
But this is politics that has blown up full time because you have a governor who is talked about as a presidential candidate. He is getting tougher and tougher with every statement. It's to his benefit to do things like this. And this is a bit of another volley right at Mitch McConnell.
Sure.
Who has himself been described as Darth Vader. You saw the cartoon on the wall in his office.
I did. One of many that he had on his office. His staff was actually gave us a tour of that in Washington, D.C. I do want to move to what Doug talked about here a little bit, and that is a potential future presidential run for Governor Andy Beshear. We know that the Democratic National Committee, they actually moved to make South Carolina their first Democratic primary in 2028. It would be in late January. I asked the governor about it today. He didn't give much, but here's what he said in reaction to that.
The DNC has now fully voted, and the initial states are set. They expanded it to 6. There are 2 southern states, Nevada and South Carolina, both pushed to be first. They are first and second. I think that they will require a candidate that can go into any living room, talk to any folks about the things that they are addressing, and they'll ensure that we have a good Democratic nominee.
South Carolina has gotten a lot of Andy Beshear's attention since he's sort of been on this national circuit as the chair of the Democratic Governors Association. He was at that famous fish fry with Congressman Clyburn. I think Ro Khanna was there as well. It's sort of seeing like sort of a rite of passage to eventually run for the White House.
Clyburn was very complimentary of him there. But the key to this move that happened late last week, setting that date, earlier date ever than ever, January 22nd, 2028, is that, as ABC News reported, I thought very clearly, this will shake out candidates, and this will bring the candidates who are really, really considering it. This moves up their deadline to make a decision. So if we're going to see something from Andy Beshear here in Kentucky, it's probably going to happen right after the midterm elections. I would think sometime in November and December. You would have to, if you're going to have a run for president for at least a year long.
Especially when you're still not as well known as others like, whether it be Pete Buttigieg, Gavin Newsom, you name it. Do want to mention real quick, though, that the Republican schedule for the presidential nominating sort of order still going to be the typical Iowa, New Hampshire Democrats, in their words, feel like South Carolina was more of a diverse, more accurate representation of what they want.
Doing it to capture the black vote, for the black voters.
That's seen as part of the process. Yes. Yeah. We have a lot more to come here on the Powers That Be. Coming up right up after this break, we are going to speak with State Representative John Hodgson, the Republican from Fisherville, about Fancy Farm, about Mitch McConnell. We're also going to talk about the governor's race coming up here in 2027. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Sue, distracted driver.
I'm attorney Alex White. If you're injured, visit SueDistractedDriver.com.
Welcome back to the Powers That Be. We are joined now by State Representative John Hodgson of Fisherville, the Republican. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great. Thanks for having me.
John, your district covers a lot of eastern Jefferson County. You're talking about the Parklands of Floyd's Fork, outside the Gene Snyder?
That's right. And a little bit of J-Town, a little bit of Middletown, Lake Forest, Fisherville, Polo Fields, places like that.
What's the Republican dominance in that area of the county now?
It's 50% Republican, 40 Democrat, and 10 Independent.
Wow. It's tough. It's tough to run there.
It's not a freebie.
Yeah.
I won by 16 points last time, but
yeah. All right. Well, you got another one, obviously, coming up here in just a few months. Are you running unopposed? Or
No, I've got a Democrat opponent.
Okay.
But we're 180 degrees apart in policy, so I don't think there's going to be any. It's not going to be a difficult choice for people.
Well, you know, we're talking about some key top Republican issues here. We've got Fancy Farm coming up, the governor's race, Mitch McConnell. Your thoughts on Mitch McConnell? Do you believe he returns to the Senate? What are you hearing anything from top Republican leaders here in this community about him?
Well, the Senate's about to go on a lengthy August recess, I think, so he's got time perhaps to recover and resume some duties in the Senate in September. I think if he says he's going to, he's shown himself to be a pretty tough cookie after a number of health setbacks, so I think he'll probably make it. I think Andy Beshear is playing a little game right now because it can get him a lot of recognition to talk about this and make demands. I think his ultimate goal is he wants an opportunity to challenge existing Kentucky law and try to appoint a Democrat to that seat if something were to happen to Mitch McConnell or he was unable to return. Now, that would be illegal, but that doesn't stop Andy Beshear.
Yeah. Well, because it's interesting. We're talking about this hypothetical that the governor himself is sort of entertaining to a degree because state law, makes it very clear that at this point it would be a special election, pretty new from 2024.
That's right.
It would be a special election if the seat were vacant for any reason, resignation, you name the possibility. The governor has essentially sort of suggested that based on the state constitution as he reads it, that he believes that he could still make the argument that he has appointing power if that were to happen, and sort of suggested he may consider that if it were to come to that.
Oh, I think he almost certainly will consider it. What muddies the water is our current Constitution was written in 1892. That was before the 17th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that made senators directly elected by the public. Prior to that, they were appointed by the legislature. So the 1892 Constitution says that the governor gets to appoint vacancies in statewide offices, but that would be things like, ag commissioner, attorney general, things like that. There was no statewide office of senator because that was the purview of the legislature to appoint. So there was about 20 years difference between the Constitution and the 17th Amendment. So this has not been tested in court, but what's likely to happen if he says, I'm going to appoint Booker, for instance, it'll immediately be challenged in court, and we won't get a resolution of that court battle until
the real election.
Until the real election
Our
happens.
legislature, John, do this specifically to undermine Andy Beshear from being able to make this decision because maybe they saw Mitch McConnell was aging and they might be faced with this very decision. It didn't want to have this Democratic governor have any influence on that decision.
Yeah, the law has undergone a couple of changes. There was an appointment process at one time, which the 17th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says the legislature will replace senators by election, but they can grant appointing powers to a governor. And so that was the case in Kentucky for a while. A number of years back, they said, no, we're going to, whatever party the senator was from, that party's going to provide 3 names to the governor. He can pick from those. That was the law a few years ago. The most recent one is this 2024 law that says it's going to be a special election. But we're actually running out of time for a special election, too. That's got to be about 3 months before Election Day, so by mid-August, you've missed that opportunity.
I mean, Representative Hodgson, I mean, do you feel like, because there have been, you've heard from folks on both sides of the aisle who do believe that maybe there were some missed opportunities when the hospitalization first happened in June, that there was a month that went by. There was some agreement on that. And now I guess the conversation is whether folks are and should be satisfied by a photo. What's your stance on that? Would it be better for you if you saw a photo of him in physical therapy in some way, shape, or form, or, speaking in a 30-second video, or what are your thoughts on that as a Republican?
I think these days with AI, people have a hard time believing anything. So I don't know, what level of proof it would take for people to say, yeah, he's in good shape or bad shape.
About an interview with a journalist, would you encourage him to do that? Somebody who's impeachable?
Somebody who's impeachable? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what his physical condition is, but I don't think he's under any obligation to do that. I think it's vitally important that the Senate be able to continue to do their business, and I don't think anybody wants Andy Beshear to have an opportunity to break the law and do something.
In a way, do you sort of owe Mitch McConnell for your seat in this area, which was so Democratic for the long time?
No, I would say not. I mean, I think the fact that he started some Republican momentum, that was certainly a Mitch McConnell thing 40 years ago when I first moved here, but there was a move happening all over the South, and I didn't have any political affiliation with Mitch when I first got elected.
I want to move on to Fancy Farm. That was an event, obviously, every single year. That is sort of the unofficial kickoff to campaign season. We hear from elected officials as well as those running for office. You were there last year in support of then Senate candidate Republican Nate Morris.
That's right.
You were right there with him as he kind of came in on the garbage truck, and I know that was sort of his drain the swamp kind of mantra there. This year, you're saying it's likely you won't be there, but I'm sure you'll be watching because honestly, there are more races that we're keeping track of. It's not just Senate, it's governor's race next year and such.
I will be watching because it's approximately 1,000 degrees cooler to watch it on TV, just to sit there under the pavilion. Yeah. Fancy Farm in person is not a physically pleasant experience. It's hot, it's insanely loud. You can't even hear what the speakers are saying. Because
come on, don't you like the barbecue, John?
Oh, the barbecue's terrific. The barbecue's absolutely terrific, and I enjoy the part before that. But during the speaking portion, if you're for a candidate, you're sitting under the pavilion, and you literally can't hear anything they're saying from the stage because people behind you are screaming and chanting so loudly. So I have to come home and watch a replay the next day to find out what people said. I have no idea what they said on
Let's talk
stage.
about the governor's race. There's reports that Michael Adams could announce his candidacy for governor there at Fancy Farm.
Okay.
You're a Jamie Comer supporter.
I am a Jamie Comer supporter.
Play out a role of Michael Adams in this race if he were to do that.
So I think Michael Adams is more moderate than Jamie Comer. I think he's popular with Democrats. He could possibly do well in a general election, but I don't think he can win a Republican primary.
Why is that?
Because I think he is too moderate for the taste of most Republicans. They want somebody with a little more hard edge to him, like a Jamie Comer. Jamie's really distinguished himself being on the investigative committee of the House and going after some of these issues. So
the fact that he's sort of sided with Andy Beshear on a few things going back to COVID, has the Republican leadership frown on Michael Adams because of that?
Well, I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I'll tell you that some of the things he did in 2020 angered a lot of people. I do a lot of speaking to grassroots groups, and they point back to that and are pretty unhappy with that.
What about the Democratic side of things? Because say Jamie Comer is the presumptive favorite, has run for governor before, is well known for a lot of Republican voters. On the Democratic side, we already have two officially in, because Comer's not in technically yet, although he will. You have Rocky Adkins and you have Jacqueline Coleman, both connected to the Beshear administration. One, Adkins, the former senior advisor, obviously Jacqueline Coleman, the lieutenant governor. How do you see that playing out in the primary? Because there is some sense that one might have to lean a little further left than the other, and that person might be the winner.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard for Rocky to lean far enough left to beat Coleman. He's an outstanding retail politician, even though I disagree with him on policy on almost everything. I've known him for probably 10 years, and he will shake your hand and be friendly and say, if there's anything I can ever do to help you, you can't help but like the guy. So I think as he gets out, particularly with rural voters and puts his message out there, people are going to like Rocky Adkins. But the energy in the Democrat Party is around, a younger candidate, a female candidate, somebody that, fits their mold right now.
The association with, I guess it's going to come down to the association of Andy Beshear. I mean, you have basically two A-list Democratic candidates in this primary. Is it Coleman more associated with him, and does that give her the victory, or is it victories in Louisville and Lexington that sends one of the two over the top?
Yeah, I think it's the Louisville and Lexington vote for sure that are more likely to vote for Coleman than I think Rocky, because Rocky's very well known in Frankfurt. He's very well known in the East. He was a basketball player at Moorhead. Like I say, a very likable guy, but not an urban politician. So he's going to have to leave his base and get more liberal to win Democrat votes in the primary. And I think that's going to be uncomfortable territory for him. I wish a candidate like a Rocky could win a Democrat primary by being true to his values for the last 30 years, but I don't think it's possible.
If your prediction held true, that it was Congressman Comer versus Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman, what do you see being the sort of the make or break in this race, strengths, weaknesses on both sides that it'll come down to? I know voter registration nowadays does favor a Republican, but we have seen, obviously, Governor Beshear win now twice as a Democrat in Kentucky.
The key thing with the governor's race is it's an off year. It's a very low turnout. So the difference will be ground game. Who can put out the best ground game and get people to show up, because we've had abysmal turnouts for governor elections and a very tiny minority of, especially in primaries, it's just absolutely pitiful. Mm-hmm. But so a very small proportion of the population will elect the next governor. So I think Comer's got a lot more experience in putting together a ground game. He's run statewide before. Coleman has not. She really doesn't have any political experience to speak of, because she was a passenger on the Beshear train to getting elected.
What issues are they going to run on? Like, what do you see being the primary, especially post-midterms? That could change the messaging kind of completely, or I know governor's races are elected much differently than Senate or House, but what do you see as being the top issues?
I think Coleman being a teacher, which he always says, the highest elected teacher in the Commonwealth, is going to run on a lot of education issues. The KEA is the most largest political force, I think, in the state. They've got a lot of clout, a lot of people that work on election day and wave signs in front of the polls. So Comer's going to have to overcome that with a ground game. He's going to be way stronger in 100 counties out of 120 because he's got friends. He was ag commissioner before, so agricultural communities are with him. So.
John, you said Adkins would have to get more liberal. I think that's what you said.
Yes.
In a primary.
Don't you think Kentucky's more ready to elect a more conservative Democrat? I mean, with the state and the way we stand right now, wouldn't that be more of an advantage?
It's the opposite in the Democrat primary, because you run to the left in the primary and maybe you run to the right a little bit in the general.
Okay.
So I think if recent history is any indicator, the craziest, most left Democrat will win the primary.
But to sweep the state in the general, you would need to be more conservative.
Yes. And then I think Rocky would be in a position where if he had run to the left in the primary and betrayed some of his core values that he's espoused for the last 30 years.
That's kind of where they're finding issue, too. I feel like the Democratic Party is sort of, where do we find our identity as far as on the ideological spectrum? Because what might win in a primary might not be the most successful in a general, in this state at least.
Well, I think you've seen the graphics of where the Democrat Party has moved. People have stayed relatively stationary in their own thoughts, while the Democrat Party platform has moved far to the left. So John F. Kennedy, if he ran today, would be a Republican.
So to bring your example, because I find it fascinating, did we just see this example play out in the U.S. Senate race on the Democratic side? Because Dale Romans was running as more of a Wendell Ford Democrat. I mean, we talked about that a lot. He felt it was more conservative, and yet here comes the progressive Democrat, Charles Booker, who wins.
Right.
Is that an example you're trying to give?
Exactly the point, yeah. That's where the energy is in the Democrat Party. In the Democrat Party, unlike the Republicans, they tend to move in lockstep. They punish people who deviate from party orthodoxy. And the orthodoxy right now is, everything's about DEI, it's about race and gender and identity politics and socialism, and that's who's winning.
Well, there's this concept, and I think both parties are trying to find the best way to message, is this concept of being best for the working class. Because I think there has been this shift that we saw in 2024 where all of a sudden areas that Republicans felt like maybe they were losing out on, they made gains. At least President Trump did. Right. Now, what you're seeing with the Mamdanis and these other Democratic socialists who are getting elected in Colorado and other states is they're really sort of hitting that affordability, probably more than anything. That's what I hear. I hear them talking about how do we make life more affordable. Whether it works or not is a different argument, but that is what they're pitching, is sort of the working class.
Affordability and working class are two different things, because Mamdani's constituents are not working class. They don't work. They are recipients of the welfare state. So he's not looking after people who are going to Ford and making cars all day and trying to support a family and coach a little league. And I think that's where Trump picked up the people the Democrat Party abandoned. The Democrat Party has taken people at the far end of the socioeconomic spectrum that are, welfare recipients, food stamp people, illegal immigrants, things of that nature. Whereas and the very wealthy that are ideologically left. But who's in the middle are the working people where you got, two parents working, trying to raise their kids and survive and, trying to afford a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
And that's who I think Trump has taken very good care of. And the Democrat Party has absolutely abandoned them.
Well, I think both parties right now are going to sort of make that argument in 2026 and beyond.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Rocky Atkins in the end would probably be the perfect Democrat to run against Jamie Comer, but he can't clear the primary.
Exactly.
Because of his conservative side, the rest and the rest of Kentucky, and you don't think that on the Republican primary side that Michael Adams could do really well in Louisville and Lexington because of the Andy Beshear, the working relationship he had to expand people's ability to vote during COVID, which was a trying time, and they put on weekends as well.
He would probably do best in Louisville and Lexington, not in the rural areas of the state. He's not really perceived as a hard conservative. I mean, I work with Michael Adams all the time. I'm vice chair of the elections committee, so we have a good working relationship. I don't want to besmirch his capabilities as a candidate, but I'll just say the general perception of others, and I talk to thousands of people, is that he is, to the center of Jamie Comer.
Well, and that's the difference between the two parties in Kentucky is that the rural Republican footprint has increased in Kentucky, where James Comer could do well versus with the Democrats, it has been the opposite. You've seen Eastern Kentucky Democrats sort of dwindle. I do want to touch real quick, we have about a minute left, on Rand Paul being at Fancy Farm this year, because that is sort of a headline in itself. He's not running for anything yet, but what do you make of the fact he's going to be there on the Fancy Farm Eve dinner, and then he's going to be speaking at the main event as well?
It'll be an interesting speech, you know that.
Yeah, well, I think he's at the point in the cycle where he's helping us defend the midterms coming up, where he wants to get that message out there. And then he's on the ballot himself in 28. I think he wants to reestablish his bona fides with the people and, touch the regular folks. He spends a lot of time in Washington, a lot of time on TV. But
you think he runs for president?
I'd say it's a pretty strong temptation for him. I don't know if he will.
Yeah.
But I think he's if you're going to win office in Kentucky, you've got to reach out and touch a lot of voters in person. Fancy Farm is a good place to do that. Western Kentucky is offended if you don't show up, if you're running statewide. And a lot of little counties, it's like, well, the guy's all right, but he had to come to my county. He skipped our Lincoln Day dinner. Why would I vote for him? And you've got to reach out and touch every little hamlet in Kentucky if you're going to win statewide.
Yeah. All right. State
Interesting
Representative.
insight from you, John. Thank you.
Absolutely. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
State Representative John Hodgson, the Republican of Fisherville, Eastern, you call it rural Jefferson County.
Jefferson County.
Rural Eastern Jefferson County. We appreciate it. That has been the Powers That Be. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care.
Powers That Be, sponsored by Alex R. White. Personal injury lawyers you can trust.